I lived in Tennessee and was a big fan of camping and hiking. In 2006, me, my girlfriend, my cousin, and 4 other friends had gone on a hiking trip. My girlfriend's uncle had a rather large property he sometimes allowed people to stay at. In one remote corner of this land, he even had a remote cabin he would rent out occasionally, and this property was connected to a no man's land, as some people called it. You could go out there, as some of us had before, and not see any sign of people forever. We intended to rough it along the back trails with the intention to camp overnight. After a long hike, it got dark, so we built a fire, set up our small tents, and had a couple of beers. We cooked a few hot dogs over the flames as well. It was pleasantly uneventful until near midnight. We had been telling stories when suddenly my cousin started looking off into the dark and began trying to shush us. After a few seconds of quiet, I started to ask what was happening when he bluntly told me to hush up. "I'm hearing voices out there, I think." We all stayed quiet for the next minute, my cousin swearing he heard a voice or voices calling out past a tree line in the distance. Soon, we started catching what sounded like the faintest yell. We couldn't quite make out what it was saying though, and a few of us started yelling out to whoever was out there in the darkness, trying to get a response. We thought maybe somebody had gotten lost. "Hello, somebody out there? Are you lost?" My girlfriend yelled, joined in by one of my friends shouting through his cupped hands, "Hello, over there." We all heard in reply what was sounding like a muffled voice of 2 people, as if they were calling from a great distance, but it sounded like there was somebody moving around just on the far side of the tree line, and they couldn't have been greater than 100 yards away. More echoing shouts coming from the area, but they were still indiscernible. It sounded like 2 people shouting at the same time. Increasingly, I became more nervous, wondering who was moving around there, imagining backwoods creeps playing games with their victims. Here, at midnight, something was wrong, and I could feel it. For a short while, we heard nothing. One of my friends went to his gear and retrieved the old Ruger Bearcat .22 revolver that his father had given to him as a gift. If someone wants to rush our camp, I'd like for us to be ready. My cousin shouted again. In response to, came 2 voices shouting vaguely again, still sounding as distant as before. But before they sounded like someone shouting words, even if we couldn't make them out. Now, the shouts were loud and garbled, wordless shouts and bang noises. Someone was moving out there. My girlfriend said what I was thinking quietly. Who are these people? Why are they here? Messing around somebody's camp now. For the next half hour, there was silence beside the fire in the nightlife. We sat on guard around our fire, straining to listen, and during that stretch we heard no more shouting or footfalls. Resolving to put a .22 round in anybody that came barging into our circle. Several minutes later we heard what sounded like people moving, about only a short distance past the light past our fire. Footfalls in the crackle of branches and leaves, like somebody was staggering about at a brisk speed. A couple of us expected someone to step in the light, but nobody ever did. Suddenly it stopped. Not another voice was heard, no footfalls or anything of the sort. No crunching of grass or branches were heard, which would indicate that whoever these people were had stepped towards our camp or departed in the opposite way. All of us were nervous, especially with how the sounds and footsteps had just stopped instead of moving away. Certain that somebody was just watching us from off in the distance, it was really hard to fall asleep. We managed to organize ourselves to sleep in shifts. At least 2 people would stay awake with the others sleep in tents. It wasn't easy, especially with an odd number of people, but the rest of the night passed with no incident. In the morning, we gathered our gear and decided to leave, the appeal of being in the woods having vanished in the night. What disturbed me was how far off the voices had sounded, yet how closely the movements had sounded near us, and how they just disappeared so suddenly. I was certain this was not just some people deciding to prank some campers or something like that. When my father passed away, I inherited the family farm in the more rural area of Ohio, just as he did when my grandfather passed. I was raised on this farm and spent the better parts of my childhood on this farm. Since I was a child, and even still to today, I feel uneasy about being all alone on the property. I consider myself an outdoorsman. Growing up on a farm with my father, we were either working on the daily chores or we would be hunting, fishing, and camping. I eventually left home and traded my home life for a military life in the United States Army. That being said, I was trained and drilled to pay attention to details. Details that most would overlook and consider are important. While I was going through my father's belongings, I came across his old hunting shotgun. I figured, as a tribute to my late father, I would harvest one last white-tailed deer with the shotgun before hunting season ended. While I was out scouting the area, I would be hunting. I had this strange, uneasy feeling that I felt as a child overcome me. I felt as if I was being watched by someone or something. I could barely make out a figure moving between the trees 10 yards in front of me. Whatever I was seeing was breathing very heavily, and the ground was shaking beneath my feet with every step I took. My blood ran cold at the mere thought of what I was seeing. When I eventually got the nerve to leave, I left that area as quickly as possible and as quietly as I could. I played it off as something as trivial as my mind playing tricks on me. The next day I went back to the area I had chosen for my hunt, and I noticed the woods around me were eerily quiet. There were no animals running around, no woodpeckers, no deer. A few hours passed as I got uncomfortable, so I decided to move and find a tree to get comfortable against. I had chosen to watch, as I was becoming overwhelmed with the worst smell I had ever experienced. Not too long after that, I noticed something odd in the distance. I saw with my naked eye what can only be described as a giant, if fairy, humanoid figure walking towards me. I determined that whatever this was at the time was no less than 60 yards away from me. I looked through the scope of my father's shotgun to get a better look at the creature. What I saw is an image I will never forget. Whatever I saw had human-like face, broad shoulders, long reddish-brown hair all over its body. The creature had to be at least 7, maybe even 8 feet tall, and its arms seemingly went all the way to its knees. I ultimately decided to shoot over towards it, just to try to scare it off. After I shot, it let out the most blood-curdling yell and roar that I've ever heard, and it made my body completely freeze up on the spot. I waited for the longest hour of my life to ensure that whatever I saw was gone. After I got my nerve back, I got up and went to investigate the area I had seen the creature come from, and I saw the biggest footprints I have ever seen in my life. My father's shotgun was a 28-inch barrel, and these footprints came within inches of being as long as the gun was. My grandfather and father told me stories about the Ohio Grassman when I was a child. For those who are unfamiliar with the Grassman, they are basically Ohio's version of Bigfoot, more or less. Both my father and grandfather always told me that these creatures lived here on this land, long before our family did. Whatever it was I saw it that day, I no longer go out to that area. I will also no longer be wandering on the property unarmed. This happened in January of 2018, when I was in 6th grade and 11 years old. I was a pretty average kid. I got A's and B's, and I had a few friends, one of which was my best friend. We'll call him Colin. Colin lived about a half an hour away from me, so I didn't go to his house all that often. When I did go to his house, we would always play in his woods. He had a good 3 acres of just forest and trees and creeks. There was also a good-sized pond that we would go fishing in the summer. However, There was an abandoned house by the end of the property. It was a normal house, 2 floors, but it had been abandoned since the 1960s, according to Colin. Since the 1970s, teenagers had been partying in it and trashing it. Colin's eldest sister Anna, who was 26 at the time of me writing this, used to party in it as well. But she stopped sometime before Colin was born for reasons he would not say. The one time we told her that we were going, she freaked out. She told us that we should stay away from that place at all costs and never go inside, especially not in the basement. We just thought that she was talking about drugs or alcohol, but we were wrong. So very wrong. I had taken the bus over to Colin's house on Friday, and I stayed the night with plans to explore the abandoned house the next morning. When we woke up, we put our orange vest and paintball masks on, so that we would be easy to find. We took a gator. It's a kind of pickup truck ATV stuff that you see at farms. We used it to the end of the trail. I noticed it eventually began to get paved. "Hey Colin," I asked. "Yeah? Did you ever pave this trail?" "Nah, man." "Huh." "Stop the gator," I yelled. Colin slammed on the brakes and asked what the hell was wrong. I was staring off into part of the snow-covered forest. I saw a set of stairs. Like stairs from your house, just taken from a random house and then dropped in the woods. I thought they were really cool, but Colin made it very clear that we should just keep going. He might have just been tired, but I think there's another reason. I've researched the stairs, and some things have come up, but if you know anything else, please let me know. We kept going, and I started to notice how the further we went on this trail, the more dead the trees were. Even though it was winter and snowing out, our trees were visibly dead. I pointed this out to Colin, but he began to just shrug it off as usual. We got to the house, and you can see the view from the gator in the photo below. The trees cleared the small yard. We get off the gator, and Colin grabbed his rifle from the bed of the gator. We went to the door, and Colin shot off the knob. "Ladies first," he said, with a laugh and a grin. It was nice of him to try to lighten my mood, but I was starting to regret coming here. We heard a loud crash in the basement. Both of us literally started pissing ourselves. "What the hell was that?" I said. I felt like I was going to throw up. We went inside and Colin aimed his gun around. We went up the stairs and we didn't find much, as everything was trashed from the parties that used to go on here. Something I forgot to mention was that the party suddenly stopped one night in 2002 for an unknown reason. There were so many mysteries in this house. I was so glad to finally be here. But I was also trying to figure out what possibly could have made that noise. We finished upstairs and went to the main floor. Once again, we found nothing of interest. But as we made our way back to the back door, we found bits of a deer, like legs and guts. We found a trail of blood that followed to the basement door. It led to darkness. "Maybe we shouldn't go down," I said, but was cut off by Colin with, "TJ, shut the hell up right now." Colin's eyes were wider than I knew possible. I thought the skin would tear at his temples. Colin pointed towards the basement and I saw it. 2 yellow eyes the size of grapefruits. I screamed. And this thing mimicked my scream in a distortion that scared the absolute hell out of me. It came closer, and the light of my phone flashlight illuminated its face. It was not human. Its eyes took up most of its face. It smiled, this horrible smile, revealing yellow teeth. It slowly cocked its head to the point to where it was passing 180 degrees. "Colin, shoot it," I said. The thing imitated my voice once again in that distorted voice. "Let's just get out of here," Colin told me, and we dashed to the door. The door was locked, and I was fiddling with it, trying to get it open, until the creature took what Colin would later call an impossibly long step toward us. and it leaned over. I didn't notice until I felt a drop of drool on my neck. My heart sank. TJ, move. Colin blew the lock off the door again. To not it somehow been put back on. We ran to the gator, and Colin floored it. We almost crashed when we heard a loud, inhuman shriek come from the house. We got back to Colin's. We called the police. And since I knew that we wouldn't be going back there ever, we said that there was a dangerous person in the house because they probably wouldn't listen to us if we said it was a monster. Colin's parents were not home and his siblings were all off doing things, so it was just me and him. The cops came after, and what seemed like hours of looking, and they told us that it was abandoned and they didn't see anything. What made me want to write this story was something that happened to me a few weeks ago. Colin texted me about 7 p.m., sounding panicked. I asked him what was wrong, and he sends me the following, copied and pasted from the actual text. Anna told me that what happened in the house in 98, she was at a party at that house and everyone was drunk except her. A guy gets taken into the basement and he doesn't come out. His parents file a missing persons report, and no one knows where he is until New Year's Eve 1999 when Anna arrives at a party to find cops examining the body of the guy all bloodied and screwed up. Anna stopped going to parties from then on. She got so mad at me, bro. This creeped the hell out of me, and I still can't sleep some nights. There is a hiking trail close to the school that I go to. It's about 2 miles to the top and a beautiful view over the entire valley. My friends and I went up one Saturday. The sun was beginning to set right as we started the 2-mile walk down. Terrible timing, but we knew the trail. Everything is good. Creepy, though, because it's getting dark and I'm paranoid to begin with. I'm not really paying attention, but I hear my friends say, "What's that?" I don't have a good eye, so I didn't see anything at first. It's a girl, my guy friend said. I was freaked. It's 9 on a hiking trail that not a single person should be on. As we get closer, I see that she's sitting on the ground in a pile of leaves with her knees to her chest, rocking back and forth. And only a pink nightgown, and it's February. It's freezing out here. My friend and I chalk it up to someone being on a terrible trip in the woods. Feeling bad since that's happened to my friend once, we debated to ask if she needed help. That was until my friend saw that she was cradling a knife in her lap. Fuck that. I'm out of here. More freaked out, we picked up our pace, but still think the girl could just be tripping. We started joking, saying it's probably a terrible trip in the woods at night to try to calm ourselves down. Then we see a man running frantically up the trail asking if we've seen his daughter. This girl was about 20, not a girl. So, we didn't think that we've seen her. We tell him that we haven't seen her because we were freaked the fuck out thinking that we just saw a girl who escaped a kidnapper. As you can guess, we ran the rest of the way back. Unfortunately, we were parked there. There wasn't a single other car. So, we couldn't give anybody a license plate number. But we did call and report what we saw. They searched, but they never heard an update. I don't know what was happening in those woods, and I don't care to ever find out. I grew up in the city. My parents were both backwoods people. But when my sister and I were born, they'd been forced to move. So as soon as we were old enough, my parents quickly sought out a large plot of land and started building a log cabin like they had always planned. Having finished my last year of high school, I spent most of my time working odd jobs around the property with my dad until college started in the fall. And this night, like many others, I just pulled into the drive from the drive to town with a bag of stuff for my dad. It was late and we were going to finish the project in the morning, so I set the parts in the barn, locked my truck, and went to bed. Sleep had come quickly after the long day, but it had only been an hour before I heard a familiar noise, rustling. Living next to a large plot of woods, with a number of cats on the property working as mousers, it is uncommon for there to be coyotes on the property. So I got out of bed, grabbed my dad's rifle, a .30 caliber lever action that we kept for these occasions, and stepped outside. Flipping on the porch light, I saw nothing of note. The cats were asleep in the bar, most higher up away from predators and the dampness of the barn's floor. Slinging the rifle over my shoulder, I walked off the deck, stepping into the large backyard, looking for anything out of place. I saw nothing of real note. The barn wasn't open, the garden was fine. In general, everything looked like it happened when I went to bed. But I still rounded the barn, heading towards the shed to make sure the tractors hadn't been taken. Even out as far as we were, crooks would go to any lengths to get stuff sometimes. As I got around the back of the barn, I saw the shed still locked up tight as well. Nothing to worry about. But as I turned to head for the house, I saw a cat in the corner of my vision. A large yellow tomcat. He was slinking around the ground. He pounced onto a mouse, killing it, before he proceeded to head towards me. But something didn't seem right. I knew tales of creatures that were stalking the forest, drawing people away from their homes, but never believed them truly. But the rifle was on my shoulder, and in my hands before I knew what happened. The cat stopped, its gaze almost sharpening, and something just seemed wrong. The other cats ran away when they saw the rifle. They knew it was loud, so they avoided it. This one, though, was staring me down. Backing away from the cat, I kept my eyes on it as long as I could, only losing sight as I rounded the barn, still backing towards the house. I watched as, rather than a cat, a small wounded dog rounded the corner, limping and looking hurt. I knew if my mother or sister saw it, then everything would be over, and whatever this thing was would kill us in the minute we got close. So I raised the rifle now, standing on the deck at the back, lined up a small shot, and pulled the trigger. The rifle was loud, even with hearing protection, so I knew it woke everybody in the house. But even the rifle's bark had drowned out by the sound this creature made. A loud, howling shriek, somewhere between a large cat, a wolf, and a person all mixed into one. It was so loud I had to cover my ears. I levered the spent shell from the rifle and raised it to fire another as the creature, now no longer a dog but some oddly deformed-looking humanoid, bounded into the distance. Firing again, I watched the round mist sailing over its head as it whipped off to the right and seemed to disappear into the woods. My dad came down a few seconds later, asking what had happened. Another rifle in his hands. I tried to explain to my parents what I saw. Neither truly believed me, though, thinking that I was crazy. I'd always had an overactive imagination, so it was no surprise that they thought that I was just making stuff up. But I know what I saw, and I don't trust the woods of Ohio. We are from a small town in southern Ohio, about an hour east of Cincinnati. This town has been plagued with people dying young in some pretty gruesome ways. Just Google Cheryl Fossil as an example. Many people believe that is caused by or the cause of activity around the area. There is a section of woods that seems to have concentrated activity throughout. The woods in question are surrounded by 2 churches, a hospital, and an area of housing. Now, as full disclosure, things do not happen every time we go in. But when things do happen, things happen that are off the charts. The most common things that we've experienced are what we've dubbed the geeks. We call them the geeks because they are tall, sometimes 12 feet from head to toe. And ganglion, they kind of move all weird like. Although, they move between trees swiftly. They never present themselves outwardly, only glimpses of them as they move between the trees. The creepiest thing about them, however, is the sound right before they start moving. Almost like a deep groan. The second I wanted to talk about is a hydra. Only one of us has seen this thing, and so far, that's the only time it's been witnessed. It is a small primate-like creature, with a face like a hideous woman, a chimpanzee body, long greasy black hair, and boils on its back. Blood red boils. The member of our group who had the encounter refuses to talk about it. These are some of the things that we've encountered. We are working on a documentary about what is happening in this area and the town itself. If anyone has experienced anything similar to this, I would love to hear about them. As children, we are all taught to trust adults, whether it be our parents or guardians, relatives or teachers. We always have been told that we could trust these people. However, not every family friend you can meet can be trusted. I'd like to say that I'm a female, 14 years of age as I'm writing this. When the story happened, I was around 5 or 6 years old. When I was little, I always went to work with my father on Sundays for many reasons. A few of them being because I didn't want to be bored at home and only hearing the whirring of my mother's sewing machine, as that's what she did on Sundays. So. Another reason was because behind my father's work, there was this wide expanse of forest, trees for miles of miles. I lived in a town where nothing really ever went on. Everyone sort of just knew everyone around town, and people let their kids play outside for hours by themselves. It was a quite peaceful and beautiful place, and I really enjoyed it as a kid. I mean, I still do now, but I am more cautious than it was a long time ago. This particular Sunday really didn't seem off until I asked my father if I can go back into the trails in the woods. You see, there was this paintball park right next to my father's workplace, and all these long trails were being built. So, though when the park was open and everything was finished, players can go into the back of the woods and do some shooting with the paintballs. However, since they were closed on Sunday, my father let me go back there. Honestly, I sort of wish he didn't. Like I mentioned earlier, I was 5 or 6 years old at the time. So little me was skipping down the trail, landing in puddles where it rained the night before. I never went too far, since I knew where to stop when I started getting in a little too dark under the canopy of all the trees. Like I mentioned earlier, I was 5 or 6 years old at the time. So little me was skipping down the trail, landing in puddles where it rained the night before. I never went too far, since I knew where to stop when it started getting a little too dark under the canopy of all the trees' leaves. I was passing a small clearing to the right, when I noticed I heard footsteps behind me. Turning around, as I was a curious little child, I saw it was one of my father's friends. Now, I did not know what this man was doing, but he seemed like he was very messed up in the head. I went on from staring at him in confusion to greeting him politely. For this story, I'll call him Bob. Hi Bob, why are you back here? Did you want to look at the trees too? I asked him, still a little unsure. He shook his head and walked ahead of me, sitting against a fallen over log in the clearing. Bob turned to me and asked, "It must have been a long walk. Would you like to sit on something?" His face had a small grin on it. Now as a child, I was very, very innocent. Back then, I thought magic did exist and well, thought he brought along a chair or something. So, being the naive child I was, I asked him, "What?" He looked down to the jeans he was wearing and unzipped the zipper in front and his private part was out. Even as a child, I knew something was terribly wrong here. "Never mind," I said, quite weirded out. I then started quickly walking the other way back to my dad's work. He shouted behind me, "Come back here." And before I knew it, I was being chased. This man, Bob, was quite overweight. Not to be rude, but it was true. I ran like a bastard out of hell away from him as he jogged about 20 or so feet behind me. In his right mind, he held one of those Swiss Army pocket knives. I believe they are called. You know, the one that has the blade with all the other handles in it. He threw it behind him and gave up trying to get me. I made it to the tree line behind my dad's work, and he wasn't up there. He was at the paintball trail entrance, thinking that's the way it led out. Instead of meeting me, he met Bob. He didn't ask Bob what he was doing, but my father he said nothing. I only remembered the story recently, and I've told both my parents. My father also pointed out that he always went into the room where I'd watch some cartoons and lay on the bed with me in strange, inappropriate positions. Not only that, but he always felt up my cousin's arm whenever he was around. We haven't seen Bob in a while, but I hope I don't see him ever again.